We've got a little bit more Battlefield controversy to discuss today. Last week, it was the 100 million player target. This week, it's the class system. It wouldn't be a new Battlefield game without the wheel being reinvented somewhere. Now, would it? We're going to dive into this today. I'm going to give you my thoughts and opinions, and I'd love it if you could share yours down below in the comments. We got tons of comments last week, and it's great to see so many people passionate about Battlefield again. And if, by the way, you're not subscribed to the channel, you're going to want to do that right now, because I'll be covering the next Battlefield game in full, multiplayer and rumoured/totally not leaked Battle Royale, and everything in between. So, let's get into this. Classes have been a staple element of Battlefield since the beginning of the franchise, establishing different roles in each match that allow you to play the game in a certain way. Throughout the different games, the classes have shifted in name, equipment, number, and effectiveness, but they've always maintained some core elements. They've always had access to a specific subset of weapons and a set of gadgets that played into the role of that class. So, for example, during the Battlefield Bad Company 2 days, the support class was focused more on player healing with the med crate and defibs, and it complemented that with suppressive fire weapons, LMGs mainly. If you go forward one game to Battlefield 3, however, the assault class was given the role of the healer, with the class adapted to have a more frontline stance with access to assault rifles. So the classes themselves would fluctuate and adapt from game to game, but they'd still maintain the same general structure of specific weapons and specific gadgets being restricted so that a specific role could be fulfilled by each one. That is fundamentally changing with Battlefield 6, Battlefield 2025, whatever it's going to be called. A few months back, Battlefield launched their new classes mantra in a blog post that drew a lot of near instant criticism from fans and potential players. We learned that weapon locks would be removed from classes, meaning any class can use any weapon across the entire game in the primary slot. So that means you could have assault players running around with SMGs, engineers running around with LMGs or marksman rifles, or even support players running sniper rifles if they wanted to. And that sets some alarm bells ringing for me, mainly because, well, Battlefield is a class-based shooter, and having limitations and restrictions built up defined roles for each class that you pick. Removing a core element of those restrictions, mainly the weapons, that weakens the definition for each class, and it pushes Battlefield in a different direction, mainly a more selfish one, in my opinion. However, the testing that's been going on in labs over the last couple of months has stuck with this unlocked weapon approach, and a couple of days ago, Battlefield released another blog post essentially doubling down on this approach. I've got a quote here from the blog post. "Everything discussed here is crucial for defining class identities and achieving our goal of creating the best class system in Battlefield's history. We have seen the suggestions to revert to previous systems and/or closed weapons. We are keeping these in mind in our discussions as we aim to connect new and veteran players to the Battlefield experience, fostering teamwork and creating a universal understandings of our systems for the future." Now, if you read between the lines there, I think it's pretty clear we're not going to see the team 180 on their plans for classes. If everything being discussed in the blog is crucial to achieving their goal for classes, then the complete absence of any discussion surrounding the locking of weapons to classes, for me, tells me nothing is going to change from here on out. Now, whether I think this move for Battlefield is a good one, a bad one, or a mixed one is something I'll come on to in a second, but I just want to highlight something that I think is extremely important and something that perhaps the dev team in charge of Labs and Battlefield is somewhat ignoring. The entire point of Battlefield Labs testing. In the Q&A section on the Battlefield Labs website, one question simply asks, what is Battlefield Labs? And a part of the answer given is, our community is at the heart of Battlefield. Their feedback is crucial in helping us to know what to prioritize, what to improve, and what feels like an authentic Battlefield experience. Feedback is crucial. Well, in this instance, it's hard to tell if feedback was properly taken into consideration. The new classes structure was detailed not long after the labs testing began, and it came in the form of an extremely well-structured blog post with some pretty diagrams, explanations, and justifications. That to me felt like an already fully formed idea. And you don't go making polished diagrams and assets for an experimental change to a core feature. To me, it's felt like the changes to classes have been something parts of the dev team had locked in on a long time ago, and any amount of feedback towards them was just simply going to fall on deaf ears. And that sort of goes against the statement of, our community is the heart of Battlefield, their feedback is crucial. You've essentially ignored feedback here. Regardless of the impact of these changes, whether they end up being positive or negative for the next Battlefield game, I just think it's a bit disingenuous to have told community members that taking part in testing and giving feedback was important when it was quite obvious that nothing was ever going to change when it came to classes. The second blog post and subsequent doubling down on the stance has all but confirmed to me this fundamental restructuring of classes is here to stay. Previously, DICE and dev teams for Battlefield games have made a habit of asking players for feedback and then going against that feedback or totally ignoring it and just doing something else. We have the Battlefield 5 TTK debacle going backwards and forwards on it 2 or 3 times before finally landing on something that no one really wanted. The implementation of COD-style perks into Battlefield 1 late in its life cycle called specializations, and even Battlefield 2042's implementation of specialists instead of classic classes. The list goes on. There's ample evidence in Battlefield's past of these head-in-the-sand moments from development teams that often lead to tension with players, and I can't really think of too many times where drastic changes like these or introductions of new features that are controversial actually lead to positive outcomes. And I perhaps naively felt that with this labs testing, with it being done on such a wide scale and being done quite a significant period of time before launch, may have had more bearing on decisions made by the development team. Of course, there are examples of changes being made, for sure, but they're not massive ones, and taking the decision to go to battle with the community so early on with a project that simply has to succeed this time around might not have been the wisest decision from the development team and the people in charge. Now, what do I actually think of the changes to classes? Well, perhaps obviously, I'm not a huge fan of them, but I do have to say, at this point, for me specifically, I don't think it really matters because I'm going to play the game regardless of what happens here. But I do think if we zoom out a little bit and we expand on this point, I think the dev team has actually created more issues, adding further complexity to the class system rather than reducing it and helping newer players get involved whilst keeping core fans happy. Again, we have a situation here where I don't think anyone's going to be truly happy with the outcome. So first, we have this elevation of training paths. Up from the previous identity, you might have heard of them, field upgrades in Battlefield 4. You must have seen them popping up on the screen. That brings an additional decision that players have to make when choosing what class to play. While still existing in previous titles in some form, the dev team appears to have made it more of a priority this time around for players to make a conscious choice on this element to help strengthen not only the class identity, but also the playstyle within the class that you've chosen. And that somewhat goes against the idea that classes should be pick up and go, as stated in the blog post. Then we've got the signature weapons, and this for me is definitely the dev team's compromise for not locking weapons to classes, because instead, you get a passive benefit if you pick the category of weapon that the dev team has deemed to be the correct one for the class that you're going to play, and that also would have been the weapon category that would have been locked to that class in previous games. To me, that's another added complication, because it implements a layer of complexity that some new players may not truly understand. So for example, if you see an assault player getting their passive benefit of faster weapon switching, which enabled them to kill you faster than you could react, but you don't understand how to obtain that for yourself, because you're running around with an SMG on the assault class that doesn't get that benefit because you're not using a signature weapon, that creates confusion. That's an added layer to solve a problem created by not having weapons locked to specific classes. Seems a bit weird to me. Then we've got signature traits, another passive element of the new class structure implemented to reinforce the class roles that were weakened by removing weapon locks. These play directly into the role the dev team wants you to play. Now this I don't actually mind that much, but again, it's another layer for new players to either learn or not learn and wonder why certain classes get benefits that others don't. And then there's signature gadgets, which, forgive me if I'm wrong here, but essentially have added a third gadget into classes in a Battlefield game now. The blog post doesn't make it particularly clear, but from what I can gather, each class gets 2 gadget slots that can be filled from a pool of gadgets for the class specifically, and then the signature gadget is locked in place to help define the class role directly. So that's 3 gadgets now, not 2 like we've had for the longest time. Maybe I'm wrong, but that seems a bit excessive. It's feeding into this idea of any player can do anything vibe that I'm getting from this entire class redesign. No matter how many times it's mentioned, something is there to reinforce a class role. It just feels like a weaker option than not locking weapons to classes and defining the way people play by the weapons that they hold in their hands, which they use 95% of the time in a Battlefield game. Now, here's what I think the dev team should actually do in this situation. And just to be clear, I think this is extremely unlikely at this stage that they will do this. Just do what the Battlefield community wants and lock weapons to classes. I personally don't believe that this is a fight that's worth all the aggravation and all the annoyance that it's creating. It's sowing the seed of distrust once again with the community. As I mentioned earlier, where the community is asking for one thing and the dev team just does another. That's not communication. No matter how many blog posts you put out, that's a one-way conversation. And that's something that I've witnessed countless times with Battlefield games in the past. I mean, we haven't even got an official reveal of the game yet. All the labs testing, all the leaks that you're seeing on social media, that's not an official reveal. That's all alpha content. That's all in testing content. And we've already got drama in the community with players because developers refuse to budge on an issue that, to me, seems like a really easy win to lock weapons to classes. This Battlefield game has to succeed. There's really no question about that anymore. And to me, this is not a fight that I think the dev team should be taking before launch, when they've got the opportunity to do what the community wants them to do, and then, perhaps in the future, after launch, seasonal changes, they can make tweaks, they can make changes that improve the player experience, and they can introduce a different concept with classes and try something new. It doesn't seem like a fight that's worth having before even the official reveal of the game. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on this. Leave yours down below in the comments section. Let me know what you're thinking about all of this, and drop a like for the almighty YouTube algorithm. Subscribe for more coverage of Battlefield as we move closer to the reveal in the summer. Catch you guys soon.